Okay, um, so I think a lot of people are asking what blockchain is, and really it's a concept that's not easy to describe, but its implications are vast, and it really questions the way our economic system works today. We're used to having centralized entities that run a lot of our businesses, a lot of our governance institutions, etc. Whereas blockchain is a network of participants that come together in a decentralized and distributed way to make an ecosystem work. One way to think about that is when we think about money today. Most of our money is based on the nation state. There's a central bank that issues the money, and that central bank has control over the money supply, right? But that money generally is only accepted in that country or a region like the euro. And so whenever you must travel from one country to another country, you need to actually exchange your money, one for another, so that you can operate. But it's like saying, if you have two different suburbs in Malaysia, let's just say there's, Kuching over here and then KL. And right now they use the same currency, if I'm not mistaken. Now imagine that they use two different currencies, and that every time you came from KL to Kuching, you would need to exchange. Now, would people prefer that, or would they prefer having the ringgit that you can use in both places? It's much easier to just have the ringgit. You don't have the Kuching coin and the KL coin. But today we have a Malaysia coin, we have a China coin, a South Africa coin, a US coin. But the world is coming closer and closer together. And what blockchain technology has allowed is this new type of currency, of money, which are called cryptocurrencies, that do not belong to any particular country in the world. And is getting adopted more and more across the entire world. And what that does is that facilitates commerce across countries in a much more seamless way. It is still very early, there's a lot of volatility, but this is normal for a new asset. And as there is more adoption, you'll start to see less volatility in things like Bitcoin and Ether and Dash and Monero, the names of different types of cryptocurrencies. And as there's more adoption and less volatility, it becomes used more as a means of exchange amongst participants of the world. And in fact, this is questioning some of our assumptions of even the nation state. Because right now, as human beings, we organize ourselves according to the nation. But we very seldom ask ourselves, why do we have these nations? Who drew these borders? Why are they there? Do they support us? Do they facilitate the progress of humanity? And I think more and more we're realizing that these are arbitrary borders. Right? We came from families to tribes, to city-states, and now we're at the nation-state. But there is a yearning for humanity to become more unified. And this technology has the ability to allow ecosystems to go across border in a way that is not controlled by a particular entity, because humanity right now is starting to lose trust in some of these trusted institutions, whether they're governments or financial institutions or religions, etc. So it's a new system that really facilitates a new way of operating that allows less censorship in the world. I hope that gives a little bit of an introduction of what it is. But what's important, I think, to state is that a blockchain ecosystem is decentralized. So you can have open blockchains or closed blockchains, but the most powerful ones are open, where anybody can come and contribute. And it is not possible to censor or to change what has been written or recorded in a blockchain.
But when you say decentralized, there must be a body that manages.
There isn't. So let me put it this way.
Such thing, a body?
I think we're still learning, and I think many people say you don't, many people say you do. I think we're still learning about what this technology will do for the world. But when you think about the internet, 20, 25 years ago, people thought the internet was something that was going to fail. right? Many people said this is something that people have this imaginary notion that it will change the world, but it's not going to go anywhere. And if you ask then the same questions as we asked right now about blockchain and blockchain technology, you would have been also a bit confused, because the internet does not have a CEO. There's no headquarters of the internet. There's no company called the internet, right? It's a network of participants that comes together to create this ecosystem that allows a transfer of communication. But what's important to note is that today, whenever we have things that are digital, they are not scarce. And let me give you the example of your telephones. You have a picture on your phone, and when you send that picture to somebody else, they receive the picture, but you keep a copy of the picture. That's very good for information, but it's very, very bad for value transfer, for money. Because what's important for money is when I give you the money, I don't have it anymore. So if I could give you the money and keep the money, then it ceases to be money. So what blockchain technology allows for the first time is that digital assets can become scarce without relying on a trusted institution. Before, anything digital, like your money in a bank account, the reason we know it's scarce is because there's a bank, a centralized institution, that makes sure that the debits and the credits add up, right? And another way of asking that is, if you think about your computers, you have a folder on your computer for your music, for your documents, for your movies. Why don't you have a folder for your own money? Most of our money, about 95% of money, is digital. And if your computer deals with digital things, why don't you have a folder for your money? Why are we taught to go and take your money, physical money, put it in a bank, then it becomes digital and you rely on another system, another computer that belongs to the bank to do that? So this technology allows you, for the first time in history, to have a folder for your money on your computer. And what that means is you don't need to trust necessarily any other institution to hold digital money. And it's based on a number of disciplines that have come together, like cryptography and advances in computer science and game theory and economics. But when you bring these things together into this new ecosystem of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, you start imagining a world that is very different to the one that we currently have. So right now, if you think about international trade, there are many different participants. There are the importer, there's the exporter, there's the shipping agents, there's the customs officials, there's the banks on each side. And all of these individuals and institutions have different roles and also have different levels of trust with one another. So the importer and the exporter need to get letters of credit from the banks that know each other to promise that once the goods are sold or are shipped, then there's the money that can transfer. But that whole sequence of trust can actually be transported onto a blockchain where the trust can be verified on a decentralized system without having to necessarily depend on a centralized institution. So it's a very, very powerful concept where our levels of trust in our current system could be collapsed. And what happens right now is, to trust, the way we can secure trust in our system is very expensive today. Because when I need to get a letter of credit, I need to pay an institution to issue that letter of credit, to promise my exporter that I do have the money to pay when the goods come. But if I can put my money into what's called a smart contract onto a blockchain in the future, that then depends on just a signal coming from maybe one of the shipping agents that says, yes, we verify that the goods have come, that releases the money, then the whole trust business becomes much, much cheaper. So we're really questioning the ability and the effectiveness of our current systems of trust. And we're making it much cheaper, and what it should enable is a much more seamless international trade finance system. So many are trying. It's still very early. So it's like, in the early 1990s when people were talking about the internet. And a lot of people were dismissive of the internet. You know, I was talking to a friend who said in the early 1990s, to send an email took 26 minutes. Not to write the email, just to click send took 26 minutes. And so it would be easy at that point to say, you know, emails are not going to change the world. If it takes 26 minutes to just send this thing, it's not instant. But technology moves. So right now, there are many countries in the world, many companies and many ecosystems that are experimenting with what it means to move trade finance and the infrastructure of trade finance onto a blockchain. We're not there yet, but the experiments have definitely started. And I think it's a very important note, which is right now there is a lot of importance and a lot of fanfare and marketing based on what blockchain can do. It's difficult to say, and I think in the next decade or two, I think we will start to see systems drastically change. But there are a lot of challenges. So right now when people use the word blockchain, they use it as if it's a magic word that will change everything for the better. But it requires humans to collaborate to make sure they're using the same blockchain or interoperable blockchains. And actually it's not that simple. It doesn't completely get rid of trust, right? Because at the end of the day, all these different participants, the customs officials in different countries, the shipping companies, the banks, the importer and the exporter, need to be in the same ecosystem. And that will take time to get people into that same ecosystem. So it's still a promise. There is no functional, widespread blockchain that facilitates trade finance today. But the experiments have started. And I think it would be unwise to dismiss the potential of this. And anybody that's involved in trade finance needs to understand this technology because it will be impacting trade finance in the future. So right now, as you said, we have the dollar, the US dollar, that acts kind of like the global reserve. But really, you can't use the dollar to go and buy, in the supermarket in KL. They're not going to accept the dollar, right? So it acts as a unit of account. Now, anything has a price in dollars, in ringgit, in South African rands. It's just a matter of mathematics and an exchange rate. If you give me the price of something in dollars and the price of that same thing in rands, I can infer the exchange rate of dollars and rands from that triangulation. So because we're having these new cryptocurrencies, right now they're still very, very small. The total value of cryptocurrencies in the world is 250 billion US dollars. So it's much, much larger than when it used to be. About a year ago, it was about a 20th of what it is today. But it's growing quickly. And so this is just another currency or cryptocurrencies are another way to measure value. But we still need to wait to see which is a global currency that will become adopted by most of humanity. Whether there will only be one or several, we don't know. Right? And it looks to be that there might be a few different ones with different characteristics. But it doesn't change the way our financial system works, which is that things are priced in something else. Value is relative. Whether I look at the price of gold in dollars or in rands or in ringgit, it doesn't change what gold is. It's just a measure of that gold. And the price of that gold depends on the scarcity of these other currencies that we're looking at. So it's just a tool, and I think this is an important point. Blockchain and cryptocurrencies are a tool. They could be used for good, but they will not necessarily solve our social problems. Right? So they're a tool that can be used for the better, but ultimately humanity will need to understand how this technology works, how they can apply it to some of the problems that we face as humanity, and how those problems can be solved with this new tool. So it will take some time.
Besides cryptocurrency, what is the function of the blockchain? Does it have any other function, or is it the cryptocurrency itself?
So there are many different types of use cases, of uses of a blockchain. Another use is something like identity, right? Or even health records. Right now, if you think about all your health records, you don't really have all your health records. Maybe some of them are in one hospital, another one is at another doctor, another one is at the dentist. And they're not in a single place. And oftentimes you need to go and repeat the same things you've done over and over again, whether it's an x-ray or anything else. So what blockchain technology will potentially allow is actually for people to have control over their own elements of identity. Whether that identity is some of their own physical attributes or biometrics or their healthcare records, etc., in a way that they can control it and expose it to people as necessary. A simple example. Right now, whenever you want to sign up at the doctor, at an airport, for a new membership, think about the amount of times that you have had to fill out your name, your address, your telephone number over and over and over and over again. Now imagine there was a way that you could reference all that information and expose it seamlessly. Right now, sometimes we can do it because you can sign into things using your Facebook account. But that means that Facebook holds and controls all your identity information. If something happened to Facebook, if Facebook went bankrupt, then all your information and your photos, etc., disappears with it. Whereas what the blockchain allows is a decentralized ecosystem where nobody's failure controls the failure of the network. And that's a very, very powerful concept, because then you can actually store data in a way that is not dependent on a single institution. So these are powerful concepts that we're starting to understand just at the beginning to see what the implications will be for the world. But they're very, very, very powerful. So many countries are now starting to think about how to regulate cryptocurrencies. It's not really possible to regulate a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin from the perspective of regulating the issuance of Bitcoin, how many Bitcoins there are. That's not what we mean when we say regulation. But it is possible to regulate the exchange of these cryptocurrencies for a national currency. So if you think about the ringgit, to exchange ringgit for a Bitcoin, it is possible to regulate that by having an exchange that needs to be licensed that can let the authorities know that certain people are exchanging their money for a certain type of cryptocurrency. So many countries around the world are starting to establish ways for them to understand who is interacting with cryptocurrencies using national currency. Because national currency is very regulated. You have to be a licensed bank in a country to be able to actually hold digital value of that national currency. So whenever you transfer money in national currency, we presumably know where it is going. It might be sometimes difficult to stitch together, but we can see it. And so when people are using that national currency to buy or to sell cryptocurrencies, that is where the regulators are starting to try to become involved so that they can have more insight into how prevalent these cryptocurrencies are and what type of an impact they're having on financial stability and monetary stability. So we're in the early stages. I think what we will see is over time, more and more governments will want to understand their people's interaction with cryptocurrency, and they will be regulating the interface and the exchange of their national currency with a cryptocurrency. It's great. I've only been here for a couple of days. I arrived yesterday, unfortunately need to leave today, but it's always great to have a group of people that come together to discuss topical issues about the state of the world. I think one challenge of the WIEF, as well as any other conferences like this, is how do you translate the discussion into impact for humanity? And that is yet to be seen as to the results of WIEF. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.